of these old days, one of these old days, and we won't stop.
Welcome back to another episode of Transitions from War. I'm your host, Mike Ergo, a Marine Corps veteran. I've returned from Iraq and faced the challenges of PTSD, addiction, and grief to create a new life that is balanced and healthy in mind, body, and spirit. Each episode, I'll share my journey or interview inspiring veterans and subject matter experts to help us find that purpose and connection we all crave. You can follow the show on Instagram at transitions_from_war. Join the Transitions from War Facebook page, Twitter, and transitionsfromwar.com. If you have questions, comments, or topic ideas, feel free to email me at mike@transitionsfromwar.com. And if you enjoy the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Today's guest is one of the nation's leading experts in career transition for veterans and public service professionals. Matthew J. Lewis is a graduate of West Point and retired lieutenant colonel, having spent more than 25 years in uniform and 20 years in the corporate world. Today, he leads global strategy and transformation projects at Deloitte, the largest professional services firm in the world, and continues to serve several veteran collaboratives around the country. Matt is the author of Mission Transition, a practical guide for veterans in transition and their employers. He coaches individuals on their transition efforts and advises employers on hiring programs designed to successfully assimilate these valuable talent pools. I will put links to Matt's info in the show notes so you can connect with him if you want to learn more, and so you can find his book, Mission Transition. But for now, here's my conversation with Matt Lewis. So Matt, welcome to the show. I'm glad you have you here on Transitions from War. And we've been going back and forth a couple of times. A nice little business trip had to delay our first attempt at an interview. But appreciate you being here.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for having me. Look forward to the conversation and cluing in the audience here to my story and my new book that just came out. And I think it'll help them in any and all kinds of transitions.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this too, because as we're talking a little bit about offline, I mean, I know how to point people in the direction of how to improve their body, their physical fitness, their mental health. But this is actually going to get people connected with something that's valuable to them, something that gives them purpose after they get out of the service. And well, let me ask you, I know you got a long career helping people do this, and obviously a career in the Army being in. Why do you think you came to really want to help vets transition in this way to find a career? Where did you see the need for that?
Yeah, so that opens the door to any number of topics. I guess I'll start with just kind of my background, a little thumbnail sketch of who I am, since I'm likely a new name and face to your audience, and segue into answering your question. Native Cincinnati born and raised, went off from high school to West Point as an undergrad. I was a football recruit there. To your earlier question offline about playing sports.
Yeah.
Commissioned out of the academy as a second lieutenant armor officer, spent 5 years active and another 16 in the reserves thereafter. Used graduate school, MBA is full-time 2-year program, is kind of my segue, my transition vehicle. And subsequent to that were various stints in the corporate world, places like Procter & Gamble, General Electric, and for the past 15 years and counting, Deloitte. Getting to your question, when I left active duty way back in 1996, yes, I am an old fart.
90s classic, yeah.
There really wasn't any sort of formal transition program. A program, again, I'm an Army guy, called Army Career and Alumni Program, ACAP, was literally in its infancy. It was administered in the last week on active duty and was totally a check the block exercise, accomplished little or nothing for me. And for that matter, all veterans of my generation getting out. So, fast forward and let me say, ever since then, understanding what I went through and kind of had to come up with my own process, I was subsequently reaching back to other individuals, veterans, buddies coming across, and I thought I'd done a decent job meandering my way. I used at the time a book called What Color is Your Parachute by Dick Bowles, who passed away within the past year or two. But a very famous career change, job change book. And that served as my basis, was a great help. And, I kind of built upon that for myself. And, I reached back and helped out others. And over the years, I'd gotten two consistent pieces of feedback from those that I helped. One was thanks, a message of gratitude, because they couldn't have done it any other way. And I was glad to help them, find their optimal landing spot. The second piece of feedback was, we got to find a way to scale what you're doing here, because it's doing good work, but we got to get this in the hands of more people because everybody needs this. Have you ever thought about writing a book? To which I would scoff, because I got a D in plebe English at the academy.
Yeah. I imagine your professor being like, "You writing a book now?"
Yeah, I never considered myself a writer. But anyway, fast forward a few more years, and now I've got, good buddies, friends, blood brothers and sisters that have literally devoted their entire adult lives, and for that matter, that of their families, to service to the nation. Multiple tours in combat, all sorts of maladies put upon them, their bodies and their families, etc. And still, in spite of the improvements with Soldier for Life, TAP, Marine for Life, and the programs that exist now, there's still, the upshot is they're still left fending for themselves. And this set me off enough to finally get pissed off enough that to start put pen to paper. And so that was the impetus. And I started doing that back in, I think it was 2016, summer of 2016. I started to finally sit down and organize this thing. It took about a year to write. It took about another year to land my publisher, HarperCollins, and about another year and a half. Here we are to actually get it out. It came out this Tuesday, so it's now widely available to any and all interested in taking advantage of it.
Yeah, so hopefully I'm going to be able to pick one up off the shelves in Target here after I take off for my little business trip here. But so why do you think it's so hard for us when we get out to transition to a civilian career? I know there's been a lot of focus on transition reintegration, and I understand it, some of it from the mental health perspective, but in terms of getting a good career, good job, why is it so difficult?
So in the book, I kind of point to four main things. First is what I'll call, in a phrase, the civil military divide. And let me characterize that as because 95+% of veterans end up going to work for someone, the gap in understanding of, call it the Fortune 1000, those organizations that have the jobs to which a transitioning veteran would aspire. So let me paint the picture and how the civil military gap has grown and will continue to grow over the next couple decades. Way back in the Vietnam generation, when they left active duty, call it the mid to late 70s, the percentage of the executives in the Fortune 1000 that had any military experience whatsoever was somewhere between 30 and 40%. Makes sense, right? You got to Korea and the World War II generation.
They've established themselves in the civilian sector. Yeah.
Exactly right. So fast forward to today, what do you think that percentage is now?
Oh, it's got to be a lot lower, because I know it's like 0.086 or 0.86% of us have served. So,
yeah, less than 0.5% have served on active duty since 9/11. But those in the executives in the Fortune 1000 have any experience at whatever in the military is now 2.5% and falling. And so, flip that around. If I'm a veteran coming out of the service and aspire to a job in the Fortune 1000, there's better than a 97% chance that the person sitting across from me has no idea who I am as a veteran, what I've done, or what I can do. That, friends, is the civil military gap. And given the population growth in the country and the minimum percentage that still continues to serve on active duty, that gap is going to continue to grow. So that's point one. Point two is, I think most folks leaving active duty don't appreciate what is a real loss that they experience. I mean, it's everything from, you lose a real part of your identity. You lose your rank, you lose the awards on your chest, you lose the instant respect that comes with both of those. You lose any authority you had with your rank to the extent you had, UCMJ authority, Uniform Code of Military Justice Authority, that's gone. You lose the camaraderie of your peers that you've likely been to combat with. You lose the certainty of a chain of command and what that poses for your day-to-day structure, the organizational hierarchy. In fact, that tends to be replaced by competition in the real world. You lose the built-in support network that comes with having your kids attend the same schools, shopping at the same BX, PX, commissary, sharing the same housing, other resources, hospitals, club systems, one-stop. You lose the expectation that those resources and built-in support networks are going to exist reliably wherever you go. You lose the structure of your daily routine, the SOPs, processes that structure everything you do. A lot of those standards, when you find your way into the civilian world, are gone. The upshot is you're entering entirely new communities with entirely new cultures that have entirely new expectations, and there's a big adjustments that's needed there. So that's point two. Point three, I'll point to, and it's the difference between who before what and what before who. So let me define that. Again, and I'll refer back to a book I mentioned earlier, What Color's Your Parachute, in which they advocate for, as does my book, that in pursuing a career change, as you're doing coming out of the military, that you first consider who you are as an individual. What are your personal strengths, your personal passions, and how does that back into career opportunities in the real world? Versus, well, what have I done in the military? What are those particular skills, and how does that translate or segue into the real world? You can figure that out via a simple algorithm. There's many of those skill translators available, and that is basically the way that SFL TAP, Marine for Life, et cetera, approach that. Here's the difference. If you approach it who before what, which is the way that I advocate for, you're going to be successful 84% of the time, at least by Dick Bowles' accounting. If you do what before who, which is the way the military approaches it, you're going to be successful 28% of the time. So that huge difference. I don't know. You mentioned you're out near Vegas. If I'm going to the tables, I'm going to bet on 84, and that's the number I like.
Much better odds. So just because you did something in the military doesn't necessarily mean that that's something you should be doing when you get out.
No, in fact, studies show the majority of people getting out actually end up in a career field different from the one that they were in the military. I mean, that's certainly
true for me. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was an armor guy, rolling tanks and shooting big bullets. There aren't too many places you're going to do that in the civilian world. So it's kind of
I looked at transfer skills. I mean, there's no one looking to hire, a grunt who skills include filling sandbags and throwing grenades. I think when I looked on like this one website, it said security guard or, retail clerk. And I was like, well, both of those are fucked. I'm not doing those.
Yeah, you got it. Similar in the armor world, you're driving trucks or something like that. And that's, that was going to be me. Anyway, Mike, the fourth point I'll ask to your earlier question is just, again, in spite of the positive improvements in the administration of the transition courses like SFL TAP and Transition GPS, in that they've expanded the time frame within which it can be taken, who can attend, the number of times they can attend, all of which is positive because of the mission first nature of the military. And frankly, that's not going to change. Folks still end up attending very late in their tenure, late enough that the course and its intended benefits don't have their intended benefit. And so, there's lots of opportunities for additional education, certification, licensure, all of which could be done while you're on active duty. Those don't take place. The mission takes priority, takes precedence. This day and age, we've got deployments going on all the time, which may or may not result in injuries and other things that, present obstacles to achieving those things that are going to help you transition. So those are the four main things I'd point to. It's a multifactorial conundrum.
Yeah.
As one transitioning captain told me, and it has a quote in the book, it's the one time in your military career when you've made a decision to get out where you got to put yourself first because nobody else is going to.
That's a good point. I mean, there's so many things that we learn getting out. It's like, I wouldn't have expected it, but all of a sudden, I learned, oh, wow, being in the military, I mean, physically difficult, very demanding on your body and your psyche. But I mean, I didn't have to worry about paying rent, paying bills, all those things besides like a cell phone bill and however much money I wasted on DVDs and beer, all that stuff was taken care of. But then getting out, and this is one thing I thought about. In most major life transitions, we have a ceremony to demarcate. Okay, you were this, and now you're going here. And the last really big one we have, besides maybe a welcome home, is like the basic training graduation. So I remember getting out, the most anticlimactic thing. I got my D214.
Oh yeah.
I drove by my barracks, waved goodbye to people, and then just drove off base. And it's kind of like, well, that's it. And talk about the most profound experiences or collection experiences most of us will have at that point in our life, and all of a sudden it's just over without any kind of recognition of that.
You raise a super point there. One is the huge cultural change, and I spend the last 2 chapters of my book focusing on culture, which is critical, absolutely critical in making your way. Another point it raises is the importance of tribe. There's a book Sebastian Junger wrote, actually, called Tribe. Yeah, super. And, I call it out as folks make their way from the service. Incredibly important that they land in an organization that has an affinity group, a business resource group, call it what you will, but a tribe of brothers and sisters, fellow veterans that can help them matriculate and assimilate into their new way of being.
That's a good point. I think we get one thing. I was interviewing someone else for the show last night, and we were talking about the way that now with social media we kind of get just a false sense of being connected with people. But if you look at communication is 90%, body language, nonverbal stuff. And so there's the idea that we can look at some text written on a screen and a picture of somebody and call and say we're keeping up or talking with people is just really misleading.
Yeah, social media in and of itself presents a way that it ends up being one way and one way communication, and I don't think it's necessarily healthful. And it ends up, at least again, I sound like an old fart here, but an observation more or less outside in, even though I've been forced to do more social media in recent months, that there's a lot of people talking and not a lot of people listening. There's a song that has that line in it somewhere.
Yeah, you're right.
But that's the upshot. And I think we'd all be better off if we spent a little more time listening and understanding one another. And I see less and less of that occurring these days. So
what are the first few things someone getting out of the military should be doing in terms of searching for a career, or how do they figure out more about themselves to get into something that is going to set themselves up for success?
Yeah. So one of the things your last question brought up, and I want to differentiate between a job and a career. You made the point, you're dependent on a revenue stream, then all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. And I think a lot of people transitioning veterans find themselves in a situation where they find, or they think, I need a job. I just got to replace a revenue stream. And again, all the more important to start as early as you can. Literally, I would suggest, as Stephen Covey would say, begin with the end in mind, meaning literally as soon as you enter the military, start to think through the education that you gain. How can that translate as a certification, a license, something that is recognized and known in the civilian world and stands up? Take advantage of tuition assistance, take advantage of GI Bill. All of those things are going to be critical in helping you segue. The other point about, don't just accept a job. Take the time to, again, putting who before what, understanding yourself, personal strengths, how that translates to find the optimal career, not a job. Why that's important, and again, lots of studies done on this. If a transitioning veteran can find their optimal career from the outset upon transitioning from the service, they will more than double their career earnings, their rate of retention, and job satisfaction. So I can't emphasize enough how big of a deal it is for you, your family, and your future employer that you take the time do that homework. I mean, this may be the first time in your adult life that you've had to sit down and consider, who am I? Typically, you've been in the service either since high school or for college, and that's what you spent doing your entire adult life. And it's going to require you to think through a whole new way of being, of talking, of thinking, of speaking. You can no longer throw out three-letter acronyms and expect people to understand it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the big cultural differences right there is just the language too, and how you speak to people.
Yeah, I mean, you can't walk up to someone, look at what's on their chest and their shoulder and understand implicitly who they are and what their rank is and where they fall in the organization. You actually have to engage in communication with people to understand who they are, what they do, what their expertise is, and how that relates to you. So,
that's a good point. That was such a big thing, like not being able to see the rank on someone's collar and their all their awards and decorations right there, because that made it so much easier to know how you fit in to the situation right there. But I'm thinking of the communication and engagement with people. So I went, when I got out, I worked for my dad's law firm for a couple of years as a clerk while I was going through community college. And I remember at a certain point they had to tell me to kind of calm down on just the formal greetings and stuff. I think I was one of the few people who'd show up to work in a tie. Everyone it was business casual at this law firm. I showed up with a tie, everything was like straight, aligned, covered, shoes were shined. Good morning, sir. And eventually the head partner there, Rick, just, Mike, I've known you your whole life. You can just call me Rick. It's like, hey, Roger that, sir. I mean, sure thing, Rick.
Yeah. Make calling folks by their first name is, that whole rank structure is just ingrained in your head, and it's tough to get over. People in the real world have real names. And oh, by the way, a great sales tactic is to actually use those names. It's kind of music to people's ears.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's just one of almost 24 different what I call cultural dimensions in the book that change, and depending on where you land, could change a bit or a hell of a lot. But the point is, transition writ large, you're experiencing all nearly 24 of those simultaneously, and that's why it's such a mind fuck, if you will.
Say mind fuck shit.
Here you go.
All these things on this podcast, but you're right. It is a mind fuck. And what I noticed too, and I experienced this myself, is how many of us get out of the military and look at maybe some of the inefficiencies or what we perceive as, not things not going the right way, and look at everyone else and say, and with this expectation that they should change, be different, be more efficient, when in reality, we're probably the one, although we bring a lot of good change or who we are to this organization, we're the odd one out here, and we're expecting the entire other civilian culture to change around us.
Yeah, I mean, that is the civil military gap. You just call it, and that's the actual experience you have, and the expectation is not that they're going to come around to seeing your way of viewing things. The expectation is that you come around to theirs, and whether that's in the workplace, whether that's in your new neighborhood, whether that's at the Y or whatever social communities that you're going to be joining, that's the way all around. And again, it's further extension of the mind fuck, if you will.
Oh, completely.
But it's something to flourish and to be a success in the real world. You're going to have to get over that. Yeah, those in the real world are not going to take the time to understand who you are, what you've been through, and meet you halfway. It's you that have to go the extra mile to meet them.
Yeah, good point. One thing I was thinking too is why having a career that you're really engaged in and brings you a sense of purpose and fulfillment is so important.
Absolutely.
Because it's one of, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you get the basic needs of food, water, shelter, all that, and then security, both in knowing where you fit in and having the needs to provide housing for yourself. So all these bottom things need to be taking place before you can really do a significant amount of self-improvement or mental health kind of work. Because, for example, in my job as a therapist for the VA, I'm not doing, really deep therapy with people if they don't have somewhere to live or if they don't have food to eat. And so once you get those needs of security and basic needs taken care of, then you don't have to really worry about it. That just goes in the background. You can really address some of those existential questions or figure out what else you need to take care of for, physical or mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. And Mike, that's precisely why I focused the book on around employment. To borrow an old, Army commercial, be all you can be. And why the first part of the book is focused on who. If you can identify from the outset, where your optimal place is in the world and connect that with who you are, and that ends up in a fulfilling career from the outset, I mean, then you're damn near the top of Maslow's hierarchy, and
Exactly.
Being all you can be. And the other point around full employment and an optimal career field of your choosing, it tends to assuage all the other issues that veterans will, tend to run into. Whether it's housing, finances, healthcare, you name it. Full-time employment and a career field of your choosing, it tends to offset a lot of those other things.
So that's the thing too. It's like, I mean, if you look at people like Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, or, the main drive we have, the primary driver isn't pleasure, but it's, purpose, fulfillment. And so having something that fulfills us career wise, you're right, will kind of assuage all those other maybe problems or struggles we have, because we know we're doing something that we believe in. I remember the shift that took place in me when I got out and I tried different jobs. I had different majors. I really didn't know what I wanted to do in life. And it wasn't until I had my own therapist at the vet center suggested I get into social work. And at first I said, well, you mean like taking people's kids away from them? And she's like, well, no, there's lots of other things you can do with it. But so for me, that was, working with other vets in the capacity that I do. Once I realized that it was something that I wanted to do, when I discovered, oh yeah, that's really on my heart to do that. A lot of other things, like I could focus all my resources. I could focus my energies towards accomplishing that goal and getting that job, versus just kind of having this overall idea of what now.
Yeah. And, you threw out a term there that comes with some stigma, at least in military communities, therapist. And, in my view, there shouldn't be that stigma. I'm sure it still exists in the ranks, but the bottom line is, and my somewhat longer experience now in life is, we all need a little help along the way to get there. And that help can come in one of many forms. And I, as well as many of my veteran peers, have taken advantage, and I encourage everyone to take advantage of help in the form of therapy, in whatever form you can get, as long as it helps propel you forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of us, and myself included, I got out as, a Marine, infantry Marine, and a man. And then, so all those were like, for therapy, no, no, and no. That's complete weakness, unnecessary. And it's not like I was, hanging off the side of a building looking to jump off at that point. I mean, but the idea that, in the same way that you would look at someone who sprained their ankle, going to a physical therapist, or broke their arm, getting that set and put in a cast, is, oh, that guy's weak. You really need to do that? You need to put your arm in a cast if you broke it, or you need to get your teeth cleaned at the dentist? That's pretty weak.
Yeah.
So many parallels to that and just taking care of our mental health. But I get it. It's built into the culture. I mean, I remember so many people who, like, oh, this guy needs to talk to the chaplain, or nobody wanted to be around that guy. Nobody. Right. And so I understand it. But it's nice that stigma's kind of going away. So besides reading through your book, besides taking care of finding out who they are, what can vets do when they get out to look around and discover what's right for them?
Yeah. So the whole who involves what I call the self-discovery process. First of which is an exercise understanding what their strengths are. There's a lot written about strengths these days, and there's some exercises I pose in the book that they go through. Once they understand their strengths, the next steps is focused around personality, and there's any number of personality tests out there. I recommend, I highlight 4 in the book. I recommend they take at least 2. That way they can link their strengths with the personality type. In doing so, that connects you with possible career fields that would be a match for you. And then the next step in self-discovery sequence is practical career alternatives. There's a decision tree that I lay out in the book and walk through everything from whether it's going back to school, staying in kind of a government service of some sort, or exploring more commercial options. Some of those could be nonprofit, for-profit, entrepreneurial, and any number of flavor of for-profit, whether it's large, mid, small cap, or public, private, what have you. Lots of various permutations, but I walk the readers through all of those options so they can best understand where they're going to end up. Once they get behind that, what I'll call who portion, self-discovery, then we can kind of get into the what, and then we start to focus around resume building, et cetera. But before I even get there, before you leave the service, take advantage of as much as you can. I mentioned earlier, tuition assistance, securing licenses, certifications, things that are going to be applicable in the real world, pertinent to the field in which you have an interest. Take advantage of that GI Bill to whatever extent that you can. There's no substitute for education in the real world. That's one thing that will always translate and show up as being valid. The other point, again, I'll foot stomp in making your way out. Make sure you find a tribe, and ideally that tribe be in your workplace, but also within whatever community you're in. And there's all sorts. One good problem we have these days is there's no lack of veteran organizations that exist to support you on your way out. But it does present.
No kidding. There's just so many vets, vets for vets, vets with vets.
Yeah.
Vets on, there's so many to choose from.
Yeah, but it does present another problem. And Admiral Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, termed it the Sea of Goodwill. In that you've got literally thousands, tens of thousands of veteran services organizations, lots of people, lots of money, all with good intent, but none of it coordinated or collaborated in a way that is presented to the veteran at a point, time, place that helps them effectively. And so one other point I'll raise to your question about what they should seek out on their way out of the service are things that are called veteran collaboratives. And let me just define what these are to illustrate the importance of their function. And I'll use Greater Cincinnati, where I live, as an example. So the 16 county area surrounding Greater Cincinnati, which is Southwest Ohio, Southeast Indiana, Northern Kentucky, there are no fewer than 2,500 501c3s or nonprofits that have the word veteran in their vision or mission statement.
Good Lord.
Yeah. Tons, same issue that is alive and well across the entire nation. Lots of people, lots of funding, lots of goodwill. But if I'm a veteran relocating back to this area, I'm not going to respond to 2,500 knocks on my door, nor am I going to go knock on 2,500 doors to get what I need. What I will do, and what does exist to enable your support, are these veteran collaboratives. The one here locally is called the Tri-State Veterans Community Alliance. I happen to sit on their board. What they function as is your one-stop. When back in the service, when you would transfer from base to base, post to post, they all had one stop. It's where you'd go to get your housing, your gear, your travel reimbursed, whatever it was. There they could manage pretty much whatever your needs were. Well, these collaboratives act as one stop in your new community. When you out process the military, you ideally in process in these veteran collaboratives. They will take an inventory of whatever your needs are, whether it's healthcare, employment, housing, finances, you name it. They will reach out to that representative subset of 2,500 in my case, and bring them in, provide them to you as the transitioning veteran at a point time place that's going to be most effective for you so you can get up to speed and transition as efficiently as possible. And
That sounds like so much of a better idea to do it
yeah,
that way. You're
yeah,
right. I mean, it seems like, we know of death by PowerPoint. It seems like there's also like death by like pamphlets.
that's
Like I
right.
remember like going to a VA or a vet center or some like any kind of veteran event.
Right.
It was just overloaded with pamphlets. I'm not reading this shit. Like maybe one will stick out, and then eventually it's like, it's the same problem I think a lot of us have. Problem being an overstatement of, oh, I'm gonna watch a movie, and so I go on Netflix and I just browse through them all, and by the time I'm done browsing through them all, I'm like, well, shit, I got things to do now. I don't have time to watch a movie. So the same with these veteran organizations a lot of time, but I like this collaborative idea of just having that one stop.
Yeah. It's a single throat to choke. You don't have to go 10, 12 different places, but
Yeah.
you're probably willing to go to one place.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Before we go, and I'll have all the links of how people can find you and find your book and order that, because I think this is just so important. What do you have going on next, or what do you want people to know about?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Mike. And again, thank you for having me today. Really anxious to get this message out. I'm obviously biased because I wrote the thing, but don't take my word for it. Take the word for everybody that's reviewed and endorsed this thing. I don't think you're going to find a better guide to getting out of the service than the process I highlight in the book. So please take advantage of it. HarperCollins is my publisher, one of the largest in the world, and the book's available in pretty much any retail outlet that you can visit. If not, they can certainly order it for you. So what I have going on, I approach my work around veterans. I think of it in three different tranches, which parallels what I see as the major stakeholder group for veteran transition. First, obviously, the veteran and their families themselves, and that's why I focused the first book there. To me, that's the most important. I have a second book in draft focused on employers, the other half of the civil military gap. Much as the first book is a practical guide for veterans and their families in career transition, the second book is a practical guide for employers in identifying, recruiting, hiring, training, retaining veterans, because there's that lack of understanding, and it's a practical guide for them. The third tranche involves the government that created them in the first place. Now, I have no aspiration to restructure the government, but what I do advocate for is what I'd mentioned before around collaboratives and promoting that business model, if I can use that term, to scale around the country. And to that end, there are a few bills pending in the Senate. The headline is veteran suicide, but embedded within them is some funding that'll be matched with public-private dollars, the upshot of which will serve as a nationwide pilot for these collaboratives that, once proven successful, and that'll easily be done, and it's a relatively simple matter of scaling that successful business model. So I think they're Senate bills, if memory serves, 1906 and 785. They've already passed the House, so we're just trying to get them into reconciliation and get them passed. So more to come on that. If folks want to follow up with me, the best way is via my website. It's MatthewJLewis.com. No dots, no spaces. Lewis as in St. Louis. Again, MatthewJLewis.com. I look forward to people reaching out. Happy to come speak, act as a speaker with the organization, or engage with you as a coach or an advisor. So check it out.
You bring up two different topics that are very related: veteran suicide and employment. Once you have a purpose and something you really believe in, that next mission, I think it makes it that much easier to deal with anything else you got going on mental health wise. I mean, like we talked about earlier. So I appreciate you coming on here, and especially being working in the mental health world now. A lot of my contemporaries and a lot of my coworkers will get so focused on things you can do, like meditation, getting up at the same time each day. Sometimes it's like, get a fucking career, get a good fucking job that you really like to do. How about let's just stay practical like that?
Yeah. Well, Mike, thank you for what you're doing. And I'm another thing I'm working on. I'm a paper that ties an incomplete or unsatisfactory transition to the military to veteran suicide ideation. And there's been a number of things written in recent years on this topic. And I'm going to do a bit more digging. And my my attempt is to more closely tie those two things together, which should add some more emphasis to the balance of my work.
Well, I appreciate everything you're doing, sir. Thanks for being on the podcast. And until we cross paths again, take care of yourself.
I look forward to it, Mike. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Of course.
All right, everyone. That's it for today. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Transitions from War podcast with me, Mike Ergo. Really hope you enjoyed it. So thanks again to Lieutenant Colonel Matt Lewis. You guys pick up his book, Mission Transition. It's on Amazon. It's everywhere you want to get books. So go ahead and buy it. I'll put links in the show notes, and as well as links to all his social media outlets and website and everything. So you can follow this show on Instagram at transitions_from_war. Join the TFW Facebook page, Twitter, and transitionsfromwar.com. We got all kinds of blog posts, guest posts, episode reviews, all kinds of stuff. If you have any questions, comments, or topic ideas, feel free to email. How do we say that? How about we say email? Email me, Mike at transitionsfromwar.com. You guys, if you enjoy the show, leave us a rating. If you hated the show, leave us a rating. Find it on iTunes. Go ahead, click the stars, put the review wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us get more exposure, and we're trying to reach as many veterans as possible. So if you think it's worth it, please do that. Just take a couple minutes. Do it. Do it now. Do it now. Do it now. Do it now. And of course, if you have friends who you think might like the show, go ahead and share it with them too. Just as easy as clicking that little share button and texting right over to them. All right, guys, that's it for now. So thanks so much for listening. Until next time, remember, drink water, meditate, kill buddies.
One of the